listening to an extra shot episode on the Project Zion podcast, a shorter episode that lets you get your Project Zion fix in between our full-length episodes. It might be shorter time-wise, but hopefully not in content. So regardless of the temperature at which you prefer your caffeine, sit back and enjoy this extra shot.
Welcome to this edition of Coffee at the Swarm. This is Mike Hoffman, your host, and we're doing this as a part of Project Zion podcast. Today, I have with me Andrew Wolsey, who's in his second year or sophomore here at Graceland University. He's majoring in history and minoring in political science, religion and philosophy, and international studies. And he's on the Clausen House. So if any of our listeners went to Graceland and were part of the Clausen House, they'll connect with Andrew pretty easily. So Andrew, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Is there anything else you'd add about who you are and what you're interested in?
I found interests this year, and really starting last year, in areas such as the Community Development Club. I'm now the co-facilitator for that. I'm also a student pastor with Mike, and I'm also a peer mentor with Mike, which is pretty cool, having two jobs working for Mike.
Yeah, well, and the peer mentor, just to let our listeners know a little bit about that, you were basically assigned to me. Of course, I think we sort of wanted that alignment to work, but that's because you're a peer mentor for first-year students as a part of the first-year seminar class. So yeah, I really lucked out because Andrew's student pastor, but also he works with me on this class. So yeah, we've had a pretty good time doing that too.
Definitely.
So tell me where you're from and maybe what it was like for you growing up in the church or being associated with the church.
So I grew up not in Central Mission in Colorado. I was born in Des Moines, but when I was 2, I moved out to Colorado. And the church for me, I feel like it was interesting. My parents were divorced, and so Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, I was with my father growing up. So the church days, I'm at my dad's house. So I would go to the Methodist church with him, and the college Methodist at night. But when I went to high school, it started to be more, I could just kind of choose the days I wanted to be at which house. And so I was able to have church days with my mother. But when I was in high school, I found out that my priorities considered sleep to be higher.
Of course.
Right, yeah. I still struggle with that today. But so I didn't really go to regular church all that often for Community of Christ. But for me, the church really was in the youth groups that we have.
Okay.
And so in the Rockies, for those of you who would know, we're very spread out through different cities. And so like in Boulder, I was the only Rockies kid there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
My cousins were in Denver, which was the bigger populated area for Community of Christ. And then Colorado Springs also. But, we also have kids in Wyoming and the Grand Junction area. So we're all spread out.
So when you talk about the Rockies, are you talking about like I recognize that name as a spec delegation. So are you talking about going to? Okay.
Yeah, Mission Center.
And okay, oh yeah, of course, Rocky Mountain Mission Center would be the official name, I guess. And so you did camps as well. Did you go to camps? Okay.
Yeah. Camps and all of that, and we also had retreats during the year, which I really appreciated.
Where did you go on retreat? Or did you go to different places? And
we would do different churches in the Mission Center.
Okay.
Most of the time in Colorado. That's for like a weekend. Like if it was like a long weekend or something, we would do that.
Gotcha. Yeah, very good. Okay. So this sounds like we're jumping forward. What brought you to Graceland? I mean, was it the connection through Spectacular then, or was it just how did you decide?
Well, initially, I always knew I was coming to Graceland because my parents had come in all of that. But when I started getting older, seeing all the Graceland reps come through the churching program and all of that, I saw Graceland as the only option for me. I actually only applied to Graceland when I was in high school. Luckily, I got in. Right.
Did you? Did I hear you correctly? It was the only place you applied?
It is. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yep.
Cool.
I applied in September, my senior year, and got in the same month. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, but you have other connections with Graceland going back a little bit, because your mom was campus minister here at one point, and you mentioned being born in Des Moines. Was that when when your mom was assigned here at Graceland? So.
Yes.
Okay.
She and my dad also taught a class here, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very good. So you always knew you wanted to go to Graceland then. So wow.
And luckily, it's the perfect fit. You know, I can not see me at any other school thriving as much as I am here.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you're here. I mean, that's, to me, it's an obvious good fit. So I'm glad you're here. So this may be early in your academic career, but there's this Graceland experience that people talk about. So how would you describe the Graceland experience, or at least your Graceland experience? How's it been for you?
I believe the Graceland experience is something you have to buy into. And if coming from backgrounds that aren't Community of Christ, or backgrounds that are similar to the environment here, then I feel it's very hard to buy into, alongside different problems such as being an athlete with the coaches kind of denying that ability to buy into the environment. For me, I've loved it though. It's the environment I'm talking about, of course, is just this leadership and community that everyone thrives to together and hold each other up and pushes each other into elements of different aspects of life we didn't know we could go into.
So you mentioned about the struggle with some student athletes sort of finding their place in that community as well. I know that's been a topic of some student government officers in the past and that kind of thing. And I think part of it is that so many of the student athletes that come to Graceland are not part of Community of Christ, and so they don't make that connection, that rich history that we have with that sense of community and that what many of us would understand the Graceland experience to be about. So was your reference sort of a firsthand experience? I mean, have you met some guys in your house that sort of deal with that?
So like one example would be my last year's roommate, who he was a part of Community of Christ and still is. He was a football player though.
Okay.
And so because of that, pre-COVID, they were able to come all early together for practice, which meant that they had their own community before the regular students came.
Right.
And it was hard to initiate those interactions and get past, like, this is your house. I know you're on the sports team, but this is the house that you're on. And so we actually had a couple people who were football players move houses from our house to be with their other football friends.
So, I see. So they would go that far. They would actually request to switch houses then. Wow.
Yep. And another problem is just, I understand why, but coaches will deny different activities for their athletes, like, say, choices or something like that, or COSA events, because they want their athletes to be focused on the sport, which is understandable. But part of that Graceland experience we're talking about is those housing experiences.
Yeah. And Choice, for those of you listening, Choices and COSA Choices is an off-campus venue that Graceland owns and operates as sort of a late-night hangout place, and COSA is the campus organization for social activities. So that would be basically a sort of student activities sponsored, or organization that sponsors student activities, I should say that. So yeah, and I guess I do understand that partially from a coach's standpoint. They're trying to make sure their team stays healthy and well and all those kinds of things. But there is a certain aspect that means those players don't have additional experiences that could bring them into community with others.
Yeah. So. I really think it's important because my roommate, he was never put in to play for Graceland as a football player. So he was going to leave the school. But luckily, when he was dropping out of that, he found that the house system was able to scoop him up and take him in. And that's the reason he's still here to this day.
Wow, that's really quite a statement then. So the house system was so significant to them that so is he back on the football team or not?
He is not on the football team anymore. Yep.
Okay. So like you said, the house system sort of scooped. I love that term, Andrew.
Yeah.
Scooped him up and sort of included in. That's really a good testament about the sort of the nature of community and how strong the house system still is here. Because, you know, I don't know. I did not go to Graceland as an undergrad, but I know it started in the, I think, early to mid 1960s. So it's been around a long time. So, all right.
Yep.
Well, let's deviate a little bit from what I said. You mentioned about the COVID, the COVID pandemic that we're living through right now. I know this has been an interesting summer. You know, you and I are talking mid-September, and it's obviously the COVID pandemic is still going on. It's been a challenge, and actually a challenge to our sense of community here at Graceland to some degree. You had 1 year without COVID here and 1 year with COVID so far. So, any thoughts about that?
The biggest area that I see COVID affect, besides just the academics, would be the commons for reality food.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you go in and the tables are set up where they're split off and you have 2 persons per table. And they're all separated, and that community sense is really gone. I mean, so nowadays the cafeteria workers are more lenient, and a lot of us who go in houses will pull chairs up to tables, and pack it up. And they don't really care much anymore. But in the beginning, it was just you go in, you get your food, and you leave.
Yeah. Well, part of it is being in any state, I suppose. But the state of Iowa had really strict guidelines about food service when the pandemic started at the end of the previous semester, and you couldn't even serve food in a dining room, so that had to change. And then once this semester started, it certainly was different. So, but I hadn't really thought about that. I do remember I haven't eaten in the Commons yet this year. I know the seating's reduced. I thought, well, students really need to have a priority about what seating goes in there. But I hadn't thought about that because I remember, in previous years, I'd see all the guys from Clawson all sitting together, for meals. That would be a big change. You also mentioned change in academics. How are your classes? Do you have some classes that are only on Zoom or partially on Zoom, or?
I had one class that was only going to be on Zoom. I actually dropped that class.
Oh yeah.
And we won't say that it was the Community of Christ theology class, but.
It was, wasn't it? That was
yes.
going to be. That was only going to be on Zoom, though. So.
It was, yep. But when you go into a classroom, you have to wipe down the chairs and the desk, and when you leave, you do the same.
Yeah.
And sitting far apart. I know we have small classes here at Graceland, but you really feel that now. Just we're all spread out as far as we can be, and it's a weird environment. Wearing masks in the classroom.
Yeah. I know you're involved with Inspire, the ministry practicum that we're both involved with here. And I know it's like we meet in Chevelle Chapel, but it feels very different for everybody to be 6 feet apart and to try then to have it like a spiritual practice or a missional practice. And so while you typically would share your response, you're sort of yelling at it through your mask across the way. So I know that part of it's been a challenge. So you mentioned that you've been a student pastor, and certainly I know about our relationship in terms of what church experience at Graceland is like. Do you have any thoughts about what you've experienced so far with the campus ministries program or Sunday morning worship afterglow, or sort of your church experience while at Graceland? Do you have any hopes for it, where it might go?
I really liked it. Coming, one of the reasons I didn't go to church is services usually growing up, besides being so early, is just sitting there listening to a service, isn't my cup of tea.
Yeah.
And here it's different. One, it's my friends, and I'm sure it's the same way for the older people at church. It's their friends speaking, so they care more about that. But they're not my friends, so I don't really have the same investment that they have. But these are my friends speaking, so I get to go watch that and support them. And they're usually pretty cool ideas that I don't really think about.
Yeah.
And then Afterglow, the service held at night, is primarily, it's a band that plays live music with a speaker, which is, I think, really cool. And then the different aspects that we have, last year we had Bible study, Book of Mormon study. This year we have coffee and tea talks. Yeah. And there's different avenues of just worship, I guess, are really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned scripture study. We haven't really started it yet. It's probably something that will get started here before long. I know that while it was popular, it was a few students were involved, but it was a very loyal group. I mean, we continued to meet even though the semester basically students left, but we kept that class going, well into after school would have been out, I guess you could say, because that group just wanted to continue to meet. In fact, I think that happened to Coffee and Tea Talks too. We kept meeting through part of the summer, just I think looking for that sense of community that some of us lost when COVID hit and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's. So you've mentioned, we mentioned at the beginning, your majors and minors that you're interested in. Do you have a plan, or is there something you want to do after you graduate?
Yeah, there's a lot I want to do. Is there are you talking about a certain time frame or just overall or?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. What's your interest in history? I mean, is that just
So I like to consider myself a truth seeker, someone who wants to understand why we are here today. I believe the past is the key to the future. And so that's why I'm a history major. I understand it's not really going to come directly into play with what I want to do in my life, but I see it as a greater investment knowing all of that information and being able to think the way historians think. So political science and religion and philosophy are more of the ways that are going to really impact my job, my career.
Okay. How so? I mean, what are you thinking about?
Well, so there's different aspects that I want to go to in the world and different outlets that I could express. I want to be a pastor when I'm older. In different ways I could express that. I talked to some people around the Mission Center, one being Daniel Harmon, and together we were coming up with ideas of new expressions that I could try to do.
Yeah.
My idea would be in the Rocky Mountain Mission Center, which is something I really care about, making sure they are growing and thriving. But other areas that I've really come to terms with are going out into different areas, not just the U.S., but say maybe I go into the Ukraine, because right now, Ukraine is being invaded by Russia, and being a pastor in that area and seeing what that's like and how I can learn and try to help out wherever I can.
Pretty cool. So hence your religion and philosophy and even international studies would play into that sort of hope to go somewhere like that and make an impact. And at the same time, learn. I mean, I appreciate your sort of angle toward lifelong learning. I know that's part of what the Inspire practicum, is sort of built on. So, yeah. So, and you want to be a pastor? That's incredible. That's really good. I really appreciate that. I know it's I know it's not everyone's desire to do that, but I appreciate your interest in that because it gives, I don't know about our other listeners, but it gives me great hope about the future of the church that there are young adults who are really interested in that. And, I don't know, you said something that caught my attention, like you and Daniel Harmon, were sort of planning new expressions. Have you come up with any ideas particularly about new expressions or?
Yeah, we were talking about some ideas and one of them being say going out into Boulder, Colorado or something like that, a city it's not really attached to the mission center in that area, and creating a program of just maybe volunteer opportunities and not having it directly tied to Community of Christ, but being this event is sponsored by Community of Christ, but we're doing this activity. And then if that happens to draw people to Community of Christ, that's great. But that's not the idea behind it. The idea behind it is to fit real world needs, trying to push past toxic charity and what we want to help, but seeing what actually needs to be helped in that area.
Absolutely. That I think you can shape Inspire with that too, because that's sort of what we try to do on campus. It's it's coming out of your giftedness and trying to figure out what you're involved with. So overall, what would be your, if you could sort of look at the entire Community of Christ, I'm not thinking just a local congregation here. What are your hopes for Community of Christ in the future? You could share something with the leadership of the church. Is there some hope you have and something you'd sort of sort of wish that would happen in the future?
Yeah. I think I would ask a question to the leadership. And that question is, what kind of church are we? Are we one that's trying to comfort a dying cause and make it just this pleasant for everybody who's involved, but eventually we're going to die out? Or are we a church that's going to make dramatic change and really not just like in our own church, but actually change in the world? And hopefully, if that does happen, that relates to our missions and principles that we hold dear to us. And, looking through history, you can't just go in 80% into this change and say, oh, we have some people doing this change. But over here, we're going to be doing resting and in the church services, doing the normal thing. I look at it, and to me, it makes complete sense that it has to be 100% all in. Everyone wants to do this change. And so my question is what kind of church are we? Are we focused on the aspect I was talking about before, or are we going to be going into the future?
And, our conversation today is sort of during a time period, at least in U.S. history or the time frame, where the issues of social justice and racial justice, to be more specific, is really becoming very much sort of front and center in conversations on the news, even within student groups. We've talked about that. Our class that we worked on together, the first year seminar. And, I don't know if you can see that the cover of the latest Herald for September and October is all about systemic racism. And so I don't know if that's where you're going, but, it's like when you talk about wanting to change, what are your thoughts about all that's going on in the world right now?
You're asking what my thoughts on how
the
church?
So when you talk about the church and, whether we are 100% in, are you talking about a church that responds to racial injustice, or are there other issues that you're thinking of when you think about making changes in the world? I guess that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
To say.
I think definitely racial injustice should be a key factor in the future of the church. But I also just think how a church operates and how we go about what the idea of church, like what is that in the future? Yeah, different problems in the world are for sure ideas that need to be talked about and listened on. But just the idea of what are we, I think needs to change too.
That's it. Okay. Well, thanks for that. So is there anything else you'd like to share about you, Graceland, the church, the future?
Oh man, let's see. If anybody out there listening is high school age or younger and wants to know what kind of college they want to go to, Graceland definitely is the one for you. GU for you, that whole idea. It's really a sense of togetherness here, which of course is the idea, we're together. But when growing up, I hear about Graceland, and I wanted to be house president. And at the time it was, oh, that's so cool. You get to be the leader of these people, right? But now I look at it as, oh my gosh, you get to help support your friends that you made on this house. That's what the house is. It's not this country, right, that you're the leader of. These are people that real people. And if they vote you in, you get to help them succeed in their lives. And that's just so cool to me that's an opportunity that Graceland offers to so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So are you planning to run for House President at the end of this year?
Yeah.
All right. That would be a House President for next year. That's good. That's a great leadership position. And like you said, working with your friends, but it's a lot of responsibility too. So yeah. Well, I wish you well in that. That's pretty exciting to do that. And I especially like your invitation to other students that are in high school to say Graceland's the place to be. So yeah, I did not go here as an undergraduate, but it's interesting. I didn't even know what a liberal arts university was until I got here, but it is so appealing to who I've become that it makes sense that it would be a really attractive and a really good fit with a lot of students who are sort of like you in the community of Christ and want to do ministry and want to change the world and want to do all those things. So.
And the whole liberal arts idea, I know for some is tough, but me coming in knowing that I wanted to do history, I'm able to take, like, say, arts classes that relate to history, or science classes that relate to history. So, like, it all makes sense to me, classes that I'm taking. And so it's cool that I get to have my field, but in different areas, and see how it plays out in the world in different aspects.
Yeah, it's a really intriguing idea to me, and I really, even though I didn't go to a liberal arts university, I think it would have been a really cool experience to come here. So, very good. Well, Andrew Wolsey, thank you for visiting with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I look forward to continuing to work with you over the next few years until you graduate and then go change the world for a better place. So, thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Project Zion Podcast. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, or whatever podcast streaming service you use, and while you are there, give us a 5-star rating. Project Zion Podcast is sponsored by Latter-day Seeker Ministries of Community of Christ. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are of those speaking and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Latter-day Seeker Ministries or Community of Christ. The music has been graciously provided by Dave Hines.